Hello, everyone, and welcome to our next DEY dialogue, Discussions in Defense of Childhood. My name is Denisha Jones, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Executive Director of Defending the Early Years. And earlier this year, we launched the DEY dialogues as short discussions that we'll have with different early childhood educators, practitioners, and advocates about really important topics that we'd love to talk about with like-minded colleagues. You can find our first three DEY dialogues on our website at www.dey.org. And we'll try and do these monthly or maybe even more than monthly. So today I saw this topic that I wanted to talk about more, and I've got Kisa Marx, an early childhood care provider and practitioner, and a DEY national advisor to talk with us about that. Hi, Kisa.
Hey, Denisha, thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us. So I feel terrible because I can't remember where I heard this at first, right? So I thought it was Instagram and I thought I saved the post and I couldn't find it. But people were
Mhm.
talking about this idea. They kept saying, leave behind, let it go, breaking up with early childhood education and care practices. And I was like,
Mhm.
wow, that's really interesting, right? So if you know where I'm talking about, if it was Heather from the Early Childhood Nerd or Carol or someone, I can't remember, I'm sorry, but it was someone
Mhm.
I feel like in our community was talking about this. And I thought it would be a great topic for a dialogue. So what I got is the understanding that as professionals in the field, we have to constantly think about why we do the things we do. A lot of teaching, and not just early childhood, but across the board, right? School year starting up, teachers are pulling out lesson plans that they've done 10 years ago and they're
Mhm.
just doing them, right? And it's kind
Yeah.
of like, but why? Why are you doing that? Because I've always done it, because this is what I've always done as part of the curriculum, because the students like it, because it's fun, right? And so I think it's starting to question, is that enough, right? As we think about being intentional in the work we do with children and how all children are different, the relationships we have with these children are different. Is it enough to just keep doing the same practices we've always done?
Mhm.
Or do we need to really start reevaluating those sorts of things, right? I taught kindergarten, I taught preschool, I was a preschool director. If I went back into the classroom, I wouldn't do half the stuff I was doing back then because
No.
I've learned that a lot of that stuff is pointless. I'm sorry, I know I'm going to blow people's minds. Like my
Oh,
circle time was a lot different. If I was forced to do circle time, it
yeah.
wouldn't be what it looked like when I was teaching kindergarten, right? Lots of things like that. And so I would just love to talk about that. So first, I want to ask you, Keitha, can you share a little bit about your thoughts on this idea of breaking up with past practices, letting go, leaving behind things that we've always done in the profession, but we're kind of reevaluating?
Yes. So I do know that I heard it from both Heather and she said letting go, and Heather Bernsanti and Kristen Peterson and Samuel Broden, they do the whole breaking up with. And so I heard it from both of those sources, and I agree with it 100%. I believe that also a nod to Heather, there's a difference between doing something for so many years and having experience. And once you have experience, you can't do it the same way. What I
Mm.
did with my babies 2 years ago, I have a child coming that right now for summer. I am not the same person. I can't do those things the same way. So I think that you have to constantly reevaluate the things you're doing because every child is not going to be the same. And you're pulling that box out of your closet with that same bag of tricks you've had for 32 years, and you're saying the kids love it, but by kids you mean you, because the kids that are coming into your room are brand new. You don't know them from a can of paint. And so it's impossible to say they love this. They might not like it at all. So I think that we have to let go of the notion, that period, that we can do the same thing every year.
Yeah, I get it, right? But at a different level. So the majority of the time I spent teaching was college, right? And so I would,
Mhm.
you plan your syllabus, and even for the same class, it rarely looked the same.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just wanted a different text. I just didn't, and everything's geared to the one text, and I'll switch the whole text up and bring in different things,
Mhm.
or assignments will change. So one of the things I do when I'm grading current semester work is I have a running document open of changes I'm making to the class, because as I'm
Mm.
grading your I get a sense that, like, oh, this
Yeah.
isn't clear. this isn't what I
Mhm.
wanted. Oh, this is really dope what you did. I want everyone to do. So I just keep
Mhm.
these notes. And when I go create the course again, I make those changes, right? And so, and it's harder, right? I know it's different with young children, but I love what you said about you. Yes, the past children loved what you did, but there are
Mhm.
not those kids coming in the door. And
Yeah.
so how you kind of think about what they need and what they might love. And then
Mhm.
I guess there's also the idea of like, you want to keep the gist of what you're trying to do, right? So maybe there's a, a broader topic you're trying to address in the activity, but then is
Mhm.
it worth changing the kind of structures around it to meet the needs of this new class, right? So
Yeah.
can you give us an example? You did a little bit, but anything more concrete of like you've done it before, but you let it go, or something? What is something that you let go practices that done in the past, and you're like, this is
Yeah.
not serving well. And I love how you talked about your own growth, right? And
Yeah.
so maybe it was tied into that too.
So I'm the wrong person to ask because I literally scrapped everything that I did and started
Mhm.
over. But I think the one that's freshest on my mind, my son works with me now as a one-on-one, one-to-one with our neurodiverse children. And one of the kids asked, I asked them something and they said, what? Their response was, what? And I just kept on talking. And he said, I remember when we were younger and that would be like activating for you, it would get on your nerves. You'd be like, that's rude or whatever. And I told him, listen, I did that because that was what I was taught. It was the way it was done. If someone
Mhm.
responded to you, what, if a child responded to an adult, what they were considered rude or disrespectful. So it was automatically a trigger when I became an adult. It made me think the children were rude. I said, but once I started to think about it and listen, I realized that children say what because adults respond what to them. And then,
Mhm.
so really, this is just language. And I really
Mhm.
had to, in my mind, trick myself. So when a child would say something to me, I would respond in a funny voice and I would say, what? So that my mind softened on the word. And little by
Mhm.
little, it changed. And now, just like he noticed, a child can say it to me and it doesn't bother me at all. So that's like the one that's freshest on my mind because it happened today.
Yeah, yeah, that's so important because I love how you mentioned the triggers. I'm
Mhm.
parenting teenagers, and man, am I triggered a lot by the things they say. And I'm like, why am I so angry? And I'm like, because I could not say or do those things without getting in trouble, right? Because it was
Yes.
assumed coming from a bad place. And
Mhm.
I don't see those assumptions now because they're
Yep.
not like right? They're very different culturally, like so I'm
Mhm.
like, they're not doing it from a bad place, but it's
Yeah.
that assumption that if a kid says what, it's
Mhm.
disrespectful. But no, it's
Yeah.
kind of like what? Like, yeah, like it could be a lot of things. What do
Like
you
the
need? What
word.
do you want? What can I do to help? Like, what is it the
Yeah.
word? So that's a really really good example.
Mhm.
I think for me, one of the things like I've been learning, and I did some observations. Keisha Reed. I was at
Mhm.
her preschool last summer doing
Yeah.
some observations. I remember teaching kindergarten and preschool, like forcing all the kids to come listen to a story at the same
Yeah.
time. Right? They
Mhm.
had to be sitting there. They had to be listening. They had to be focusing on me. And
Mhm.
then I'm at her center, and I'm just sitting in the reading the library area, and kids start handing me books, right? And so
Yeah.
I start reading, but then they go away, and I'm like, do I keep reading? And she's like, yeah, if you want. So and I was
Mhm.
like, do I? I knew I wasn't the environment to make them come back over, but it
Right.
was so weird to just keep. But I just kept reading, and then the kid maybe came back, maybe didn't. But then another kid handed me a book, and so then I read that book, and then maybe two other kids came over, but no
Mhm.
one stayed through the entire
Yeah.
story. And I read like 10 books, but because kids
Mhm.
were handing them to me, but it was more fun because they weren't forced into it. They
Mhm.
could come and go as they pleased. But I read 10 books, and those kids heard me,
Yeah,
whether
they
they listened to
heard
every
you.
word or not. They heard the dialogue, they heard the story, they thought it was funny. A few of them remembered some things later. So it was the literacy and the reading time we want for kids, but it
Yeah.
wasn't controlled the way I was taught. Kids
Mhm.
have to sit and listen to start and finish a story. They can't get up in the middle of it and go do something else, right? And so it was
Mhm.
just such a different environment. That's something I would leave behind, right?
Yeah.
Forcing story time to be this compliant thing, right? I would allow children to come and go as they please, in the middle of a story, and just keep reading to whoever
Yeah.
or no one, right? And just
Mhm.
enjoy the book
Because you
for the
wanna
sake of
read
the
it
book.
and you wanna enjoy the
Yeah.
story. Yeah, so I
Yeah.
would even go deeper and say that I could let go of the mindset that children learn sitting or standing, staying in
Yes.
one place. They're still hearing you. They can still recall parts of the story or giggle to things that are funny because they're still listening. It doesn't look the same for a child as it looks for an adult. And that
Yeah.
control comes from us thinking that it does, and it does not.
Yeah. And then the next day, no one handed me a book and I read 0 books. And that's the other thing, right? And that's okay too, right?
Yeah.
Like it just did, you can't recreate that moment where I was in the same classroom, I was sitting in the same space and there were 2. No one said, here, read this, here, read, so you have to let that go too, because it's like you're going to expect that same magic to happen over and over and over again in that same
Yeah.
kind of way.
Yeah.
Feel like you're doing something wrong, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, letting go of our thoughts about how children learn, what learning looks like, what learning
Yeah.
needs to happen, I think is super important,
Mhm.
especially as we're coming back and we're trying to welcome kids into the classroom and like set these relationships and these experiences. How much are we bringing past beliefs and past practices to this group that may or may not suit them, right? So, what would you say? I feel like, I can talk about this all day. I don't work with children every day now, right? You're like, whatever, you're not in the classroom. So, you work with children, you have your program. What would you say to someone who's got a lot of experience and I think there's some belief that like, you hear a lot of them, children need structure, which also translates that children need repetition. Children need
Mhm.
to do the same thing over and over and over. And sometimes they do, don't get me wrong. The whole scheme of play and all of that, we know children are benefiting from that. But I think sometimes a lot of early childhood teachers will think that they have to keep the routine and the structure the same because that's what young children need. And if they make any deviation in it, it's going to upset the balance, the relationship. That might be one reason. Other people just might be it's easier to just do the same thing I've done every
Yeah.
year. So what would you say to someone who's like, they're unsure if they could actually do this, if they could break up with some of the practices they've always done?
I think the first thing to do is to check in and make sure that what you're saying and what you're doing are in alignment. Because there's one thing to say that children need structure, and there's another thing to be exhibiting control. So
Mm,
you're calling it by one name and then doing another. And that's what happens in a lot of classrooms, is that you're saying
hmm
children need structure. But by structure, they mean I need to pull all the strings and you need to do as I say and and not as I do. And so once we familiarize ourselves with getting everything in alignment, what we're saying and what we're doing, then we need to figure out whether when we do our routine, is it a routine or is it a schedule that we need to keep? If you have a ritual or routine, you can do that anywhere. Whether
okay.
kids are sitting or standing, you can read a book. You can read a book by a tree. You can read a book at a circle. You can read a book at the park. You can do any of those things. You can keep your ritual. You can keep your routine, and the child gets that sense of around this time. I feel like we're gonna read a book. There's books in the wagon, there are books on the shelf, and they can do those things over and over again. What really has to change is you, not the
hmm
kid. So we have to tap in and say, okay, if I believe the children really need routine, how would this routine look everywhere? Because anything
hmm
else is just control.
Yeah, that's so important. So it sounds like a lot of like really deep reflecting on why you're
Yeah.
doing stuff, a lot of introspection, and
Mhm.
I love that because routine is code word for control, obedience, right? Wanting
Yeah.
everything to just feel the routine, like feel. I
Mhm.
think the routine is almost more for the educator too. You want
Yeah.
to be able to predict what's going to happen in a very unpredictable environment,
Yeah.
right? And
I
so
mean, the most unpredictable environment ever.
yeah, yeah. So you can imagine for some people that's very scary
Yeah.
that to sit back and not have a plan, not know what's going to happen. We don't. We can have all the
Mhm.
best laid plans in the world and still not know what's going to
Nope.
happen, right?
Yeah.
I know you follow Melinda, and I love how she posts her lunch plans, and like it goes awry. She has these
The
great
best
ideas,
meals.
makes this amazing lunch, and then the kids are like, give me my peanut butter and jelly, ma'am. No, thank
Yeah.
you, right? And so, but that's okay,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and you think
Yeah.
about all the teachers who set out invitations to play. You sit
hmm
and you think about these invitations and you think they are the best things in sliced bread, and those kids are like, "Nah," and they
Yeah.
where else
Nope.
they don't
Yeah.
care.
Yep. And parents know you buy the expensive $50 gift and all they want to do is play with the box
The
it came
box.
in. The gift is not exciting, right? And so, yeah, there needs to be this kind of comfort within yourself about letting go of control. Like you can't plan for every moment. You don't know what's going to, and that's okay. But also leaning into that is a very good thing about the work we
Oh,
get to do
yeah.
with young children, that there are so many surprises and different way directions they can go if you lean into that, right? But if you're resistant, then that's going to be challenging, right? So yeah, I love this idea of like the self reflection, the introspection part of this work. That's super important for all of us to do, right? I have to do it in my as a parent. I have to
Mhm.
do it as a college professor, and any of the work that I do, right? I have to constantly ask, why are we doing this? Who does it benefit? What do I get out of it? Right? Is it easy for me to grade? That happens a lot, right? Where
Oh,
some things are
yeah.
just easy to
Mhm.
grade, right? I think with
Mhm.
the new AI taking over,
Mhm.
people are finding out that the things that are easy to grade are also easy to use AI. And so now they're challenged by these
Oh.
other things,
Ah.
right? Like what you do, right? And I think it's the same thing with young children, right? The activities that you know how to set up, you know how to do, you know how to start and finish, you know all the materials, you have them. They're easy to do for the children, and so you're comfortable with them. But how do we get people like to push past their comfort zone and to really think about, so any other thoughts about what you might suggest to folks about good skills or steps to really do that kind of self-reflection, and thinking about practices that, yeah, they might have worked before, but that doesn't mean we need to keep them going.
I I like to stir the pot a lot. I think abolish homogeny. If it's the same, get rid of it. It's problematic because if
Mm-hmm.
it's the same, it doesn't serve everyone. If it
Mm-hmm.
looks the same, it's not for everyone. So
Mm-hmm.
you need a little razzle dazzle in your life. You have to break up with everything being the same. If it's cookie cutter, throw it in the trash. I don't care if you had 35 years. You don't have to throw it literally in the trash, but put it in a nice sealed box and put it in your garage and never use it again because it's not serving us and it never served our children. So
Mm-hmm.
we got to break up.
We gotta break up with it. I love it. Stir the pot, definitely. Push people, yeah, take all that stuff you've done before and just imagine not using any of that. And really, I
Yeah.
think it allows for some creativity too to think about it. Like,
Yeah.
what are things that you're not using in your classroom that you could be
Mhm.
using? Materials, ideas, things that kids never get to explore because you don't take it out. Like that kind of, I remember I had some stuff in my classroom, my kindergarten classroom on the back shelf, and I
Mhm.
would take that stuff out and then take some really popular stuff that the kids love though and hide
Yeah.
it. And Miss
Mhm.
Jones, where is that? I'm like, I
Mhm.
don't know. Someone must have came in over the weekend, y'all. I can't help you. But look what I found. And
Yeah.
it took a while, but they switched to the other stuff, right? And so
Yeah.
getting to explore different materials that way, I think is also really helpful.
It
So we
is.
talked a little bit about reflection. Can you talk a little bit more about that? I know we're going to talk about your upcoming work that you're going to do with us that we're launching soon, our reflective practitioner series. So I just want to end with you sharing a little bit more about the need for reflection and the benefits that it has in the work that we do.
I think there's really something to be said about reflection. It doesn't come easy or naturally to everyone. And even a very introspective person doesn't, isn't the best at reflecting at the things that they do, right? But in this line of work, it gets greater for everyone when you have a reflective practice. Because guess what? If you're a fantastic teacher with your bag of tricks that you've used for 20 plus years, think about who you could serve, your families, the administration, the teachers coming up under you, if you reflect on your practice. So no one loses when you stop to think about what you're doing. No one, not one person, because the children that you're missing, you start to pay attention to that. The children that you notice, you start to find more ways to connect with them. The families that aren't being connect that you're not connecting with, you start to find ways to connect with them. You start to be able to check your own behavior.
Mm,
So all of it is based on you just taking a beat and thinking about, why am I doing this? Everybody's
Mm,
why, your why, your why. Reflection is your why. It's not all rainbows and butterflies. It's why did I think that? Why did I say that? Why did I do that? I just had an experience today where a child did something and it was not safe, and they were older, and it scared me, and then I reacted, right? And so he came in and he went to do something else, and then I could tell like his back was turned to me. Now
mhm,
I could have been like, oh, this child was dead wrong. What he was doing was unsafe, and
mm,
my response was right. But then I thought, maybe he's embarrassed. Maybe he feels ashamed. Maybe he's upset that he thinks he disappointed me. But I had to
mm,
think about that. And once I
mhm,
did that, all I could do was empathize and
mm,
to stop and talk to him about what actually happened. You can't get that if you don't reflect. All you think is that you're justified in your actions.
mhm.
And I know
Yeah,
I've done that years ago.
yeah, yeah. And it's super important. I noticed that with my parenting too, when I'm like, if I don't reflect and then go back and do, and it's okay to be like, you know what? I don't like how I handled that. I don't like what I said.
Yep.
I had some time to think about it. I've told
Mhm.
kids sometimes, I'm not going to answer that question right now. I need to think
Yeah.
about what I want, because you
Yeah.
don't want to just jump right in. You need to think, you need to reflect, right? And I know it's hard because teachers make so many in the moment decisions, right?
Mhm.
But it's okay to be like, can I take a moment to think? I mean, modeling that for children is so powerful. I hear
Yeah.
what you're saying. Can I take a moment to think about that and give you the best answer I can? And
Yeah.
it shows them that we can't always launch right in with the right answer. And it's okay to ask for more time, and it's okay to do that. Or to come back and say, hey, I wanted to follow up of the conversation we had earlier. It's not sitting well with me how we left it. Can we come back to this? I had a friend who
Mhm.
said she would leave her students notes like, hey, I'd like to check in with you at
Yeah.
2:30 today, yes or no. And the kid could check the yes or the no, and then she would know that she could check in with them, right? And I
Mhm.
thought that was so cute, because I'm like, yes, that's what you need. It's like permission to just go back and go back to something, and then follow up and respond. And that's where but you need time, right? I think the hardest thing is
Yes.
that teaching is so strapped for time, because everything is
Mhm.
so rigid and scripted that we don't have the kind of time that we want and need. But you
Mhm.
have to take that time, and it's super important. And I also like that teachers, we don't realize we are reflecting a lot of times. We just don't
Mhm.
think about it. The reflection is how we make the decision. Oh, should I do this? And we're like, well, I
Yeah.
did that last time. It's so intuitive,
Mhm.
right? And so you're thinking about, so how do we like really stop, honor that process, allow it to go deeper, right? Because that's
Mhm.
super important. And
Yeah.
that's what we hope you guys are going to join us for the launching of our Reflective Practitioner series. We're about to release it soon. It's starting next month in September. Kisa is going to be leading 3 months of reflective practice. I guess we'll call them a workshop, a series, right? It's hard to say
Mhm.
because they're live and asynchronous components to it.
Mhm.
But I don't know if you want to say a little bit more about your thinking behind the Childhood Protectors Hub and the reflective work that you're going to be doing.
I think everybody needs to feel like there's something that's actionable. When you're making like a monumental change, you don't want to keep thinking, I'm going to fall flat. I'm not going to be able to keep up with this. That's the reason why a lot of people don't do really hard things. They're scared to fail. The Childhood Protectors Hub is they're actionable things that you can do. Not Monday, not next week, not next month. You can start them today. And that helps us see that like what's that saying? Pennies make dollars. Small things become larger, and you have to just keep on building upon them. And that's what I really love about it, is that they're every single thing is actionable. You don't have to be a super reflective practitioner. You can grow, and that's how that happens. Nobody just ends up being this reflective practitioner. They have to evolve into that. And so this is baby steps to get there.
Great. And we're also hoping that it strengthens not only your practices, the relationships, your thoughts around curriculum, but also your work in advocacy around protecting
Oh,
childhood, right? What
absolutely.
I've seen so far is that there's a connection there between how you engage with the children, but then how you think more broadly about the work of early childhood education, and the work of all of us, and this idea that we have a lot of work to do to make sure children are getting what they deserve. And so it's that kind of like going deep in reflection also leads to action, right? And so that's what we're hoping that you get out of this. And yes, the work you do with children is paramount, and that you're thinking about that, but thinking more broadly about the work we do in the community, right?
Mhm.
DEY all about advocating for a just, equitable early childhood education. And we know a lot of teachers are doing that. And I think one of the things that's missing is that early childhood teaching is advocacy for young people, for families with young children, for childhood, being protected from all of these things, right? And so I hope that this Childhood Protectors Hub will strengthen both your reflective practices and your advocacy skills as well, too.
Yeah, they run hand in hand. I really do think that. That once you
Yeah.
do one, you'll do the other. Yep. Mhm.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Kisa. And everyone, please look for an upcoming announcement. It is going to be a subscription-based service. We are trying to generate a little revenue here with this program, so we're going to give it a try. I'm almost done creating the place where this is all going to be held, and so I'll be field testing it out this week, and then we'll go live and launch it. And we hope that you will join us. You'll get Kisa as your guide for the first 3 months and the first 6 sessions within this series, and then hopefully we'll be able to expand and do more with all of you and our national advisors who are interested in that as well too. So be on the lookout for the Childhood Protectors Hub coming soon. And if you want to talk more about early childhood practices that you're letting go, leaving behind, breaking up with, please feel free to send us a message at DEY. Also, use hashtag Breaking Up ECE. Tag us on Instagram and Facebook. We'd love to hear more about your thoughts about this. And if anyone wants to talk more about more examples, we'd love to hear that to help other people in their journey. Like, what's a practice that you're letting go this year, you're not bringing into the classroom for the 2024-2025 school year, or maybe last year, something that you changed in your practice you let go of, especially something you didn't think you could let go of, but you did. And we'd love to hear about that. So please
I would
feel
love
free to
that.
reach out to us.
Yes.
Yeah, you can always send us an email at info@dey.org. You can go to our website and fill out the content, the information that'll come to. We'll get that via email too, and then you can find us on Instagram and Facebook. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks, Kisa.
Thank you, Denisha. Bye bye.